Awesome. So just to get us kicked off, talking about what is HOST. Our mission is to be healthy, housed, and connected. And the Department of Housing Stability, we were created by executive order in fall of 2019. And we brought together housing and homelessness from other departments throughout the city. We invest in resources, create policy, and partner to provide housing stability to resolve episodes of homelessness and create housing opportunities. Next slide. So HOST's 5-year strategic plan, which covers years 2022 through 2026, was developed through nearly 2 years of comprehensive community engagement, and it was unanimously adopted by Denver City Council in November of 2021. More than 1,000 stakeholders participated, including residents with lived experience, funders, businesses, nonprofit partners, and community organizations, advocates, council members, and many more. We, in partnership with our 5-year strategic plan, do annual action plans, and we began the process for our 2024 annual action plan in March of this year. And in May, we did a community survey asking for feedback on our goals from the 5-year strategic plan. And the top 3 goals from the 5-year strategic plan were identified by that survey. The first was address unsheltered homelessness. The second was expand access to affordable housing opportunities. And the third was expand pathways to successful housing for people experiencing homelessness. Next slide. This is a slide with a lot of words, so I'll take my time with it so you can read through it. But these are the 10 major strategies that HOST will work to accomplish in 2024. So the first is that we'll bring an additional 1,000 people inside, people out of unsheltered homelessness through the House 1,000 initiative. We'll serve more than 3,500 households experiencing homelessness and rehousing and supportive housing programs. We'll create and preserve 1,765 affordable homes through investment of affordable housing pipeline and effective implementation of Denver's mandatory affordable housing ordinance, contributing to Denver's citywide goal to create and preserve 3,000 affordable units. We'll serve more than 9,300 households in housing stability programs, including providing legal counsel and eviction proceedings for at least 2,000 households annually, and we'll explore additional funding sources for housing stability moving forward to increase the base levels of support that can be provided on an ongoing basis. We hope update the Affordable Housing Preservation Ordinance to align with long-term affordability goals and priorities for use of preservation funds. We'll expand Affordable Housing Review Team, also known as AHART, to ensure efficient consideration and review of affordable housing projects and reduce permitting times. We'll expand support for supportive housing pipeline by working with partners to maximize the effectiveness of housing choice vouchers, including city-funded project-based vouchers. We'll prioritize language access and culturally appropriate messaging, develop and implement engagement strategies that go beyond city council and registered neighborhood organizations, and focus on two-way communications with more intentional listening in coordination with citywide outreach and engagement effort. And we'll utilize the new affordable housing search website and database to complete the implementation of the prioritization program. And now we're gonna move to Menti. The next slide will have the various ways that you can do this if you haven't done this before. This is a way that we can poll and get feedback from you all. You can join Menti at menti.com and you'll use that code 2362-5050, or you can scan that QR code on the screen to get to the Menti. And we'll give it just a few seconds with that slide before so folks can get up and running with the Menti. All right, the first slide looks like we've got will you go back just one, Katie, on the Menti? And this question is, overall, how strongly do you support the priorities identified in the 2024 action plan?
And just so you all know, these are completely anonymous, so.
Yes, thank you. All right. And just again, you can join at menti.com and you can use that code that's up there at the top of the screen. We'll go ahead and move forward. And I think folks were already answering some of those questions about got some good feedback and overall priorities for the action plan. Great, thanks for your feedback. We'll go back and next we'll talk about our proposed.
Do you want to address any of these?
Oh, sorry, that's a great point.
I was just going to address the one in particular. Let me start my video here. On can we see parameters for criminals, drug users, child molesters in places where families are being housed? So one of the really important things about having folks who are experiencing homelessness be in shelter or housing is that once they are in a residence with an address, they are required to submit that information to the police department so that they can be monitored and do their routine check-ins. So if they're still in an encampment, that's not considered a place of residence. And so they're very often not registering in those cases. So we really think it is a much safer and better thing for folks to be in shelter where they're required to do those routine check-ins for sex offenders lists. In terms of other criminal background, drug use, those types of things, we as a city put a high value on having low barrier shelters because it is most important, first and foremost, to get people into housing, into shelter, so that they can begin to work on the wraparound services that they may need to treat substance use disorder, to be able to make it to parole meetings, to be able to continue working, those types of things. So we really want to encourage folks to come into our shelters where they have case management and can be supported with those needs, as opposed to being out on the streets and not engaging in case management. I think we'll probably...
Do you want to talk about the community engagement for beyond City Council and RNOs?
Yeah, so we actually put this information out about our planned priorities to get information early this year. We wanted to get ahead of having the plan drafted when we were getting our feedback. In the past, we've always drafted the plan and then asked for feedback. This year, we really asked for that input on the front end. So we did that in the spring and got a lot of really great input from community at that point in time. which we incorporated into the drafting. We've had a number of community engagement meetings with our Housing Stability Strategic Advisors, which is our advisory board. Those are all public meetings and are posted on our website, and we put them out in our newsletter. So if you're not part of our newsletters, I encourage you to sign up. You can give us your email here or go to our website at denvergov.org/housing, and you can sign up for our newsletter and get information about that. We do put information out about the action plan through our newsletter, on our website, on our social media platforms, the city's social media platforms, and then we share it with city council and ask them to share it through their newsletters. We don't do a whole lot of engagement on the annual action plans beyond that in terms of community meetings because we did the front end community engagement on our 5-year strategic plan. And so this is really just looking at the priorities for this coming year's work, not on the overall strategic plan. Cumulative impact of proposed sites, I want to say that's likely related to the House 1,000 initiative, which we will be talking a little bit more about. And while there is a cumulative impact to having folks in shelter, we also know that the city as a whole is experiencing a significant increase in unsheltered homelessness. And we really believe that having folks out on the streets without those supportive services is, one, not the best outcomes for them, and it's not the best outcomes for the neighborhoods as well. And so we really want to get those people into shelter or housing along with those wraparound services so that we can start working on getting them back into permanent housing and stability. We are very much working to spread out all of the sites throughout the city. I think a lot of folks don't know that we already have shelters in quite a few different areas of our city. We have a couple of new shelters that are being built. One is a family shelter on West Colfax. We have a new youth shelter that's being built on South Broadway. We have a couple of new shelter purchases over in District 8, so Northeast Denver. We've got a new shelter, the Clarion, that just opened in Northwest Denver. And we are about to announce next week the purchase of another shelter that will be located in Southeast Denver. Those are larger shelters in addition to the shelters that have historically been downtown in the central downtown core. We have 2 shelters that are on 48th near Colorado Boulevard. And then a lot of smaller shelters, such as the Gathering Place and Dolores Project, that are in various areas of the city as well. So we really are looking at spreading that out. The House 1,000 initiative particularly will also have a number of smaller community sites that serve about 60 individuals each, and those are being placed in various areas of the city as well. We can speak to workforce housing. Polly, I'm trying to remember if there's anything specific later in the presentation. So I think we need one of the things we did in our strategic plan is really looking at what we mean by workforce housing. And so we really look more at what area median income is and what people are able to afford at different AMI levels. That's a pretty standard federally used way of looking at income. And we look at people's income ratios compared to the rents that they're paying. And so when we talk about workforce housing, you might be looking at what does it look like for somebody who's making minimum wage up to maybe 120% of area median income. And so in our strategic plan, we do have a lot of information on that. I would encourage you to look into that because we do talk about where we're focusing our funds and why we're focusing them where we are. We have a significant focus on our most low income units, and that is because that is where the biggest gap is in the metro area. And so we're focusing on like 0 to 30% AMI as being our core where we want to focus our investments. And we know that when we do that and we create more units at that lower end, it frees up some of these other units that are then available for folks that are at slightly higher incomes to be utilizing. And district is being unfairly targeted and absorbing 13 times the amount of any other district. I'm guessing that the 13 times the amount of any other district is a District 8 person, and you are correct that There are a number of hotel purchases in that area recently that are coming online. We are making purchases and have shelter build outs underway in a number of other districts. They are not the total number of people that we're seeing in District 8, and that is definitely true, in part because there are a lot of underutilized hotels in that district right now. And so those were opportunities that we were able to utilize. They will be used as non-congregate shelter in the short term, but the goal with the House 1,000 initiative is really to get people into temporary non-congregate shelter, which are the hotel rooms for now. And then we'll be moving those folks into supportive housing as time goes on. Some of those sites are planned to be converted into supportive housing units. And we do actually have a map on our website at denvergov.org/housing. You can scroll down to our housing dashboard, and we have a dashboard that shows where all of the supportive housing in the city is. You can look at that by district. You can look at that as a city as a whole. You can look at the very low income housing and where those are located. It gives property names, addresses, number of units, who those properties are serving, and you'll see that it is very well dispersed throughout the city. Most of our programs are very intentional about making sure that we have affordable housing and supportive housing units throughout the city. So I think over time, what you'll see is that the supportive housing isn't going to be front loaded in any one area. What we are seeing right now is that the non-congregate shelter hotel units will be used temporarily over the next couple of years. Yes, several of them in District 8, but also as I said, we have Clarion in District 1. We have a couple of other hotels that are also coming online as shelters in other districts. And then we have the VOA Family Hotel in District 3. And I'm trying to think what district it is. South Broadway, Urban Peak is our youth shelter that's coming online as well. So very well spread out over the city, and even in the number of units, I think if you look at what those are. And we'll let Polly go ahead and move on from there, and I will work on answering open questions in the Q&A.
Thank you. Next, we'll go through each of our divisions of our department. We have housing opportunity, housing stability and homelessness resolution, and our operations division. And we'll go through each of those and the goals that we have there. Some of these are from that first list that I already went through, but some of them are more focused just to that pillar of work. And then we'll have the opportunity for feedback on each of these pillars. So each of these, we have goals, and then we have the strategies that go with those goals. So goal 1 is under housing opportunities to expand access to affordable housing opportunities. And here we are looking to develop and preserve over 1,700 homes through investment in affordable housing pipeline, strategic acquisitions of hotels, and effective implementation of Denver's mandatory affordable housing ordinance. And this helps advance Mayor Johnston's goal to create and preserve 3,000 affordable units annually. Also looking to expand that AHART team to ensure efficient consideration and review of affordable housing projects and reduce those permitting times. And then under goal 2 is preserve existing affordable housing. Here we're looking to update the preservation ordinance to align with long-term affordability goals and priorities for the use of preservation funds. And then on the next slide, we have a unit breakdown of what those 1,700 plus units look like. So the housing type is in that first column, and our 2024 target is in the second column. And we've got rental homes created. Under that, the subcategories include, not limited to, but deeply affordable rental homes, and then also 3 or more bedroom. We also have rental homes that we're preserving, the for sale homes that we are creating and preserving, supportive housing that we're building, and then also those mandatory housing units that we expect to get from the expanding housing affordability ordinance. And again, all of this goes towards Denver's citywide goal of creating and preserving 3,000 affordable units annually. And then we'll move to our next mentee to give feedback specifically on those housing opportunity priorities. And so just how strongly do you support the priorities? And there's the join mentee again in the code. And the next slide will be about how strongly do you support the plan priorities that we have identified for housing opportunity. I'll give just a few folks some time to get to Menti. Got a lot of strongly support, and some do not support, some strongly do not supports as well. Give it just a couple more seconds on this one, and then we'll all right. Seems like we've reached a major point there. And then the next slide for the Menti is just offering, do you have any additional feedback on the housing opportunity priorities for the 2024 action plan? Got a thumbs up. Give it a couple more seconds and then we'll move on to housing stability. But want to give people the opportunity to provide feedback if there is any on the housing opportunity strategies.
Hey there. I just want to acknowledge that, yes, this meeting currently or did have 13, it had more than 13 attendees. We had 17 at the beginning of the meeting. Totally want to acknowledge that that is not great attendance. However, again, we did our community surveying on this in the spring and received significant input on the drafting of this plan. That's not even counting the 2,500 people or so that gave us input on our 5-year strategic plan, which is where our action plan is rooted in. We do put word out about this pretty heavily, and we're happy to take more input, but we don't get a lot of feedback on these plans, to be honest, because they're pretty in-depth. Happy to entertain any ideas about how we can get the word out about that more. We are definitely prioritizing residents and listening to that feedback. Again, we hold these meetings in advance of developing the plan. We have public meetings every other month throughout the year with our housing stability strategic advisors who ultimately adopt this plan. And then we hold these meetings and also survey residents. I do want to also acknowledge that sometimes people just don't attend public meetings because they have other things going on in the evenings. And we definitely also have our survey out there, and that is one of the other ways we've encouraged people to give us feedback. Let's see. What is the pace of new entrants at 30% AMI that we will forever provide housing for? I'm not sure I understand that question. So if you want to put more in the Q&A, I'm happy to answer that for you. People who are in income restricted housing or who have housing vouchers or who are in supportive housing do not always stay in housing forever. They are sometimes moving on to higher levels of income restricted housing. They are sometimes moving on to be paying for market rate housing. I think it depends entirely on a person's individual experiences. I will say that what we are seeing in the Denver metro area is that housing continues to be extremely costly and be more and more difficult for people to afford. And so we are seeing more and more need at those lowest incomes for people to be able to keep up with the cost of living. We do have more than 45,000 households out of 115,000 households in Denver in which people are housing cost burdened, which means they're paying more than 30% of their incomes toward their housing. And of those, about half of them are severely housing cost burdened, which means they're paying more than half of their incomes toward housing. And that's the exact type of thing that creates more homelessness in our community because people are just one job loss, one emergency room bill, car breakdown away from losing everything. The total number of affordable housing units that we intend to develop is just over 1,700. That's for the year. And affordable housing units are different than the shelter units that are part of the House 1,000 initiative. So House 1,000 is bringing online shelter units. Those are non-congregate shelter units. They are not affordable housing. So we are actually developing housing that is affordable for people to live in so that the people who are going into our shelter system right now have places to become homes that they have their own keys to and live their own lives in. Shelters are a very different situation in which people don't have that level of autonomy, and that's what we want to get them back to is stable housing where they can live their lives and be successful. Okay, Polly, I think you're good to go.
Great. We'll move on to our housing stability priorities. And these, I'll wait just for a second for us to get our slides moving and grooving. All right, so goal 1 of housing stability is to help households remain in their home and neighborhood of choice. And our priorities under this goal include investing $29.1 million in rent and utility assistance to help households stabilize in housing. We're also looking to explore and identify possible funding sources for housing stability to increase that level of support that can be provided beyond emergency and pandemic recovery. We're also going to work with Denver Public Schools and the Denver Office of Children's Affairs to develop communications and strategies and referral systems for programs that support housing stabilization of families with children. And goal 2 is to reduce evictions. And we're planning to provide legal counsel in eviction proceedings for at least 2,000 households annually and increase the proportion of low and moderate income households facing eviction who have legal representation. So those are the proposed priorities for housing stability. And then we'll go ahead and go back to our Menti. Well, the next slide is the QR code again and the Menti the Menti code and address. We'll give folks just a minute to get back there. And then we'll go ahead and the first Menti question is, how strongly do you support our housing stability priorities in the 2024 action plan? Great, I'll just give it a couple more seconds. We've got 5 strongly supports, a couple supports and do not supports, and 1 strongly do not support. All right, let's go to the next Menti option, where you can enter your feedback that you have on those stability priorities. Why do you support those priorities? If you have questions about those priorities. Also, why you don't support those priorities. Give it a couple more seconds for any more feedback.
Hey, Polly, I just want to plug really quick and related to this question at the top about the support votes. Menti is an anonymous platform, and we don't know where these feedbacks or votes are coming from in this platform. But at the end, we have the link to our more detailed survey where folks will have much more opportunity to give detailed feedback. So just wanted to say that this is not our only mechanism receiving feedback from folks tonight.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. And we've got a link on the last slide for folks to move towards that survey to give more detailed feedback in addition to this, but we're taking all the feedback that we can get. We do have a lot of priorities. We have grown in a lot over the last several years since we were created by executive order. We've got a staff, I believe, of over 100 now, and are very diligently working and working to move the needle on affordable housing and preventing homelessness and resolving episodes of homelessness. All right, I'll give it just a couple more seconds. Sabrina, I don't know if you saw anything that you wanted to jump in on, but.
Sorry about that. I was responding to Q&A.
No worries.
We are coordinating with Human Services. Federal funds to state and county can do a lot. Yes, we are routinely working to get state and federal assistance. We know that this is not something the city can address on our own. And so we do work very closely with state and federal partners. And we are working side by side with Human Services on all of the various needs that folks have. So thank you for that. Too many priorities. It's a lot. Appreciate that. We do have measures, quantitative measures that are associated with all of these priorities that we report out on our progress on our website. It is denvergov.org/housing 5-year plan. And if you go to that, you'll find our dashboard that shows all of our progress on each of these different measures. And you can look at various different pieces of that and break it out. So that is something we are tracking very closely and really monitoring to make sure that we are tracking to our goals. Keeping people in existing housing is most cost effective and should be a stronger focus. Rent and utility assistance is important to keep people from becoming homeless. Couldn't agree more. Our city council obviously agreed as well. They asked the mayor and had the votes to unanimously pass additional millions of dollars of additional funding for rent and utility assistance in next year's budget. And so we're very happy to say that we're now at $29 million in rent and utility assistance and eviction legal assistance for next year to help keep people in their existing homes. And in terms of elderly being more of a focus in the plan, we don't focus on a lot of those different target groups in specific. There are lots of different data measures that we can look at, and we do have some specific programs for folks who are elderly or have a disabling condition. We look at a lot of different data about a lot of different demographics within our plans. But what we find is that income and measuring folks' area median income is one of the best ways for us to figure out what is their housing cost burden and then to address those needs. So you'll see a higher housing cost burden for the elderly because they are on fixed incomes. And therefore, looking at their housing cost burden is one of the ways that we really help determine where people need housing stability supports. And then also we have done a lot with tax rebates as well, working in concert with Human Services. Would love to hear more in your comments, either in the survey or the Q&A about workforce and elderly being more of a focus, in particular workforce. Wanting to understand how you're defining that a little bit more, I think. Will there be an opportunity for people to reduce rent or increase subsidy as the needs should arise? So our housing choice voucher program, which is actually facilitated through the Denver Housing Authority, which is separate from the city. That is the federal vouchers that used to be called Section 8 vouchers. Those do adjust based on income and help kind of fund the gap between someone's income and whatever the market rate housing is that they're living in. So that can help with reducing an individual's rent, if that's what you're referring to, and increases the subsidy as needed. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sabrina. Next, we'll talk about our proposed plan priorities for homelessness resolution. And we've got three goals that we're focusing on in 2024. The first is address unsheltered homelessness. And again, this is bring in an additional 1,000 people out of unsheltered homelessness by additional funding for hotel conversions and ongoing operations, micro communities, as well as rapid rehousing. Goal 2 is expand pathways to successful rehousing, and we will expand support for supportive housing pipeline by working with partners and maximizing the effectiveness of housing choice vouchers, which we just chatted about. And then goal 4 is improve homelessness resolution system for families. And here we're going to maximize the effectiveness of use of housing choice vouchers by partnering with Denver Housing Authority on strategic use of homelessness preference. So So leave those just for a couple more seconds to let folks absorb, and then we'll go back to our Menti to get feedback. All right, and we'll hop over to the Menti. And how strongly do you support the priorities identified in the homelessness resolution section of 2024 action plan? Give it a few more seconds. For the folks that don't support it to various degrees, would love to hear in the next section why, or also in our feedback survey, again, just plugging that to give more substantive feedback as well, but would be interested to know why you don't support the priorities, or what feedback you have on the priorities, of course. Yeah, we'll go ahead to the next slide. Give it a few more seconds for folks. Goal 3, just to address that, goal 3 is still there. It's still happening. There will still be work. These priorities that we're discussing tonight are like the top of the top important for the department to work on, but we have a lot of work going on into goal 3, the shelter transformation, that is happening.
We are looking at Aurora as well as many other cities across the country. We're constantly scouring data and looking for best practices. We do a lot of regional work with our neighboring municipalities and counties, and work with Metro Denver Homeless Initiative to really make sure that that 7 county area is working together to combat homelessness. So thank you for that. It's a great cue. The migrant population is a tough one. So right now, what we are seeing is an enormous influx of migrants who are being offered shelter in different facilities that are specific to migrants and their needs. including interpretation needs. But many of these folks have other places that they want to go, or they just need help getting jobs so that they can get housing. And so there's some different needs in those communities. And so those migrant shelters are housing people for a period of time now. And it has changed a number of times. And I want to say it's 21 days, but I could be wrong. So don't quote me on that. Denver Human Services is really operating that, the migrant shelters at this time under the city's Emergency Operations Center. Those folks, when they time out of shelter, as we have seen throughout the city, are often ending up unsheltered on our streets and also seeking shelter in our homeless shelter system. We've always had migrants in our shelter system, but we're seeing a huge influx of that. And we have seen a huge spike in the number of families that are needing shelter right now. So we are working very closely with Denver Human Services in the Emergency Operations Center to try and address how that is going to change our landscape in coming years. We are definitely constantly monitoring our shelter capacity as a result of that, and really working closely with our citywide partners to figure out how we can help this particular population. Let's see. I just want to be clear that the mayor's House 1,000 initiative to bring 1,000 people indoors by the end of the year is not the whole big picture of what the Department of Housing Stability does. So hopefully what you've seen in part today through the action plan is that we provide rent utility assistance and eviction legal assistance to try and keep people in their homes stably housed so they don't become homeless. We are working very hard to develop more affordable housing and supportive housing throughout the city so that people who are currently experiencing homelessness have affordable places to get back to stable housing. And so the House 1,000 initiative is really very focused on not just homelessness resolution, which we do very broadly with our entire shelter system and the very broad variety of shelters that we offer, but House 1,000 is very focused on getting the 1,500 people who are currently living on our streets every night off of the streets and into the shelter system. We have 3 times that many people staying in the shelter system every night here in Denver. 75% of our homeless population does utilize our shelter system. And so we're really looking at how do we get those 1,500 folks who are still staying on the streets back into some kind of shelter so that they have a connection to services, so they're not dying on the streets, so they aren't living in encampments in our neighborhoods. We know that is the worst place for them, not having access to bathrooms and hygiene and trash and all of the other things. But we also know that's best for our neighborhoods in terms of getting people off the streets and into shelter where they have connection to those services so that we can start helping them. I don't believe there are 1,300 new residents coming into a 1-mile radius. I'll pull those numbers for you. I'm happy to go over them with you. But it is not 1,300 new residents. I believe that is including the potential for the folks who could be housed at those hotels in the ballrooms, which is only during emergency weather activations that do not happen all that frequently. I think we anticipate there being no more than 20 in a single year, and that isn't always the case. So while that would bring some people in for a single night of shelter, that is only for an overnight sheltering that is bust in and bust out for an overnight stay. So, and that is only in instances where the weather is less than 20 degrees and there's precipitation in Denver. There will be a good neighbor agreement. That's what a GNA is, for those of you wondering. Good neighbor agreements are being worked out with the neighborhoods on all of these different sites. There are wraparound services built into all of these, and so I'm not sure why there's not a clear path for wraparound services, because they are built into all of our contracts for the operators of these facilities. And there is recourse if it fails. Host holds the contracts with all of these operators. We monitor their contracts. We do site visits. We work with the neighborhoods. I just this Tuesday agreed with the Quebec Business Association to hold monthly meetings with them to talk about their concerns and to address them. We've been doing that for a very long time. I have monthly meetings with a lot of neighborhood associations throughout the city who neighbor various different shelter facilities. And we are always happy to and do take your concerns and work very hard to address them. And I believe have done so very successfully in other areas of the city. And I believe we'll be able to continue doing that. The recourse is that host can cancel a contract at any time for failure to perform those contracts. And so we take these jobs very seriously, and we make sure that these providers are serving the folks that are in their operations in their facility, that they are providing those case management services and they are moving people onto housing successfully, so that we have the opportunity to serve more individuals. So there is recourse. There are always opportunities for us to cancel a contract. We have never had to do that because our providers are very responsive both to our feedback to them and to the neighborhoods. So just want to re-emphasize that we work very hard to be responsive. And if you want to email me, I'll put my email address in the Q&A as well if you ask for it. Thanks, Polly. You can go ahead and continue.
Thank you. Our next and last pillar of our division of our department is operations, and the operations team holds supports our other divisions here. So these are a little weedier priorities, but still want to run them by the community and hear your feedback on them. So for operations, I've got 2 slides on operations. Goal 1 is expanding communications and community engagement. So we already talked about these ones, but prioritize language access and culturally appropriate messaging, and develop and implement engagement strategies that goes beyond City Council and RNOs and focuses on two-way communication with more intentional listening. Goal 2 is expand and support partnerships through transparent, efficient, and effective procurement, contracting, and financial processes. Here we're working to update host business practices to take advantage of the expanded functionality and improved data system to provide more efficient electronic contracting and invoicing processes and tracking to our partner. In the next slide, we'll wrap up our, so goal 3 is to deepen data infrastructure to provide transparency, accountability, informed decision-making, and support continuous improvement. So here we're going to plan for additional data collection and analysis efforts to better inform host work and understanding of community needs. And goal 4 is to advance citywide and regional approaches, including policy and legislative agenda. And here we're going to work to utilize the new host database to complete the implementation of the prioritization policy, which was passed by council last year. And I think I forgot to put a Menti slide. So if we want to go back a couple slides for folks to connect to Menti, and then we'll get your feedback on the operations section of the plan. Give it a couple more seconds for folks to enter their level of support. All right, we'll move to the next slide, which is where you can enter your feedback on the operations priorities. Katie, can you move us to the next slide? Thank you.
Hey, and I am working really hard to answer all of the questions that are in the Q&A. There are about 17 open right now. I do want to just thank you all for your patience. We are presenting our action plan for the Department of Housing Stability, which includes these 4 areas that Polly has gone over. So again, that's the affordable housing through our housing opportunity plans, housing stability, which does rent and utility assistance, keeping people in their homes, homelessness resolution, which does include the mayor's House 1,000 initiative, as well as our operations. I'm trying really hard to answer all of the House 1,000 questions that are very specific to the hotels in District 8, and I appreciate all of you being here for that. We do have a lot more community meetings coming in District 8, and I hope you all will attend those and ask your questions of the mayor about his initiative and how that is rolling out. Much of that is being conducted through the mayor's office and not directly through the Department of Housing Stability, although we obviously partner, and it is definitely helping us to achieve some of our goals. This action plan is really a much bigger picture and much broader, and it is about how do we get more of that affordable housing, more supportive housing for folks to move out of shelter and into those other opportunities over time. So I hope for those of you whose questions maybe I don't get to, that helps somewhat. I know it's frustrating when you can't get your questions answered. So again, please feel free to reach out. My name is Sabrina Alley. All of our emails at the city are our first name, period, last name at denvergov.org. So you can reach out to me at Sabrina Alley at denvergov.org with any questions you have. I'm happy to meet with you. I'm happy to meet with neighbors, and we'll work on making sure that we're getting all of your questions answered, including not only about words, but the actions, about how we are holding our providers accountable, how you as neighbors can make sure that you have the resources you need, the accountability you need. I hear those concerns in particular to the House 1,000 initiative. So thank you for sharing those here. I will make sure that those comments make it back to the mayor's office as well. So just want to encourage you to continue to participate in that neighborhood's ongoing meetings so that we can continue working with you. And then thank you to all of you who are working on or giving us feedback on the rest of this plan. It's really important to us that we understand the full picture of how we're doing this in an integrated way across the city. I will continue to work on these. Polly, do you have more to present tonight, or is
I don't have more to present, but we do want to just go back to the last slide of the slide deck, which has the link to the survey where folks can provide more feedback. I lost my lights. I'm sorry. I'm now a ghost.
Oh, no. Thank you. So yes, please do take our survey. That's the link there. It is also on the action plan page on our website, so you can get to it there. Please encourage others to give us feedback on this plan. If you haven't taken a look at our 5-year strategic plan, I would really encourage you to at least read the executive summary on that. There's actually a lot of really great detail in there about affordable housing in Denver, about how this whole problem came to be and what our steps are to getting us out of it, how we plan to do that by 2026 when our 5-year strategic plan will be up. This is 1 year of that 5-year strategic plan, and so really appreciate your help thinking through the priorities in this next year, especially under this new mayoral administration with the intense focus that they've had on unsheltered homelessness. So I appreciate that. I'm happy to stay on here for a few more minutes and try and answer some of the questions you all had in the chat live if folks want to stay on. But that concludes what we have on the 2024 action plan. So if you would like to leave, you're welcome to, and I will try to go through this document as I can, or go through the rest of the Q&A as I can here. So I will get to the units. I know a couple of you had questions about the number of units that are coming online in District 8, so I can try and get to that. I apologize that one of the last District 8 meetings, the DoubleTree meeting, I believe, there were a lot of really legitimate questions asked in a very calm way, and I do think that the mayor tried to answer all of those as best as he could. Understand that there were some folks in attendance that felt differently and didn't necessarily express that they were concerned there was a lack of empathy in the district. I do think there are different different views on how this works in a community depending on where you are and what you've experienced in your community yourself. So I apologize if you felt like some of those folks were not being respectful at that meeting. There are third-party providers that manage the properties. So the provider has a contract with Host, and Host is, and Polly, if you need to go because the lights are up, I totally understand. Host owns the contract with the providers of these facilities. Those contracts lay out in express detail what they are responsible for, and we monitor those. We are on site. We take complaints from neighbors, concerns from neighbors, and we will work with you on making those things happen. Like I said, my team has been doing that kind of community engagement for years around many of our shelter facilities. We've been very successful. We've had businesses near shelter facilities who have asked for additional trash pickup, who have asked for additional security, additional patrols from the police, and we have made all of that happen. We've asked for bus stops to be moved closer to the shelters so that people aren't wandering through the neighborhood so much. We've had that accomplished. We've had neighbors living near a shelter ask us if we could create a smoking area for folks because they were all standing out loitering on the sidewalk, kind of blocking the sidewalk while they were smoking, and we were able to accomplish that. We've had neighbors who were really concerned about folks who have history with who are sexual predators, and on that list, how they were being registered. We've had the police come in and talk about that whole process and explain how that works. We've had folks meet with neighbors, all kinds of things. So I think whatever your concerns are, if you want to reach out to us, I'm always happy to work with you and your neighbors on addressing those concerns and making sure that you have a voice inside that's listening to you, and that I am helping to facilitate the accountability of the partners. We do also have that good neighbor agreement, which Steve Charbonneau is a longtime facilitator in Denver, third party, does a fantastic job of facilitating those agreements. He has worked with a number of providers and neighborhoods before. And what we have historically seen is that once these facilities are operational and some of the initial quirks maybe get worked out, generally speaking, the neighborhoods are very pleased with how their agreements are going, and a lot of times have determined that they didn't need to continue meeting on a regular basis because they felt like their needs had been addressed, and were cooperating well with the shelters and the providers on their own. So again, we feel like we've been very successful with that at other facilities. How should execution against these initiatives be independently monitored? So we do monitor our progress, and we report out on our progress every year in an annual report. We have a real-time dashboard on our website that shows how we are making progress on each of our goals and strategies in the plan. So I'd encourage you to look at that. If you're speaking more specifically to, again, like a specific shelter facility and how to make sure that we're monitoring those, we have data requirements in our contracts. We are monitoring that data. We are reporting it out to City Council. We consider it when we determine whether or not we want to amend a contract to extend it in the future. If we see that those things aren't happening, we work with our providers to make sure that those changes are being made so that we have improvements in real time as we go. And so that is how we have typically done that. There hasn't been a need for independent monitoring, although I will say that we are working with the City Council, the Mayor's Office, and several other departments to look at some opportunities for additional shelter accountability and how those providers are accountable both to the guests staying to them and to the neighbors. And so there will likely be more information coming out about that in the next month or two, and opportunities for people to get involved in that. Yes, Colorado Coalition for the Homeless owns Fusion Housing, which is a supportive housing facility in District 8, very near the Doubletree Hotel. They do own Clarion. We partner with Colorado Coalition for the Homeless on a lot of different things, including our street outreach teams, which are highly successful. They have very high success rates of rehousing folks successfully, exiting them from shelter into permanent supportive housing. I know there have been issues at Fusion, and I am not sure why they haven't been addressed. So I think that's something for us to continue to dig into. With CCH, they are very open to community feedback like that. And so if that hasn't been addressed, I'm certainly happy to help facilitate those conversations. The city is not an active participant in Fusion Studios, and so I'm not aware of the exact issues that are going on there or what community conversations have happened with CCH in the past. Denver Rescue Mission is actually not in District 8. I believe it's District 9. So I'm not sure. And we don't count Fusion Housing because Fusion Housing is supportive housing. You actually would have far more than that in your district if you were looking at all of the supportive housing, because supportive housing is throughout the city. You probably don't even know where a lot of the supportive housing in your district is. Fusion seems to be a place that has a lot of issues going on. And again, I'm happy to continue working with you all on that. But our supportive housing is different than shelter. Non-congregate shelter in a hotel is a very different thing. People are not typically there for the long term. Supportive housing is somewhere that people tend to stay for a longer period of time. We do have supportive housing throughout the city. So when you're looking at a 1,300 number, I guess you're you are adding both shelter and some supportive housing in your district. And so I guess I would just want to be clear that there's a difference between non-congregate shelter facilities and beds available versus supportive housing where people are actually living. The DoubleTree, I believe, has an expectation for 300 some units, and I'm sorry, I didn't have time to pull this up. Best Western has less than 200. Comfort Inn is currently a family shelter that we are renting rooms in. And again, Rescue Mission is not in District 8. I don't know if you're referring to Stay Inn, but Stay Inn would also be a supportive housing property, not shelter. No one has been working with the RNOs in Park Hill or Central Park. Please reach out to me. I will get my email in that. Happy to help with that. We rely on our city council people to be engaging their RNOs in our community meetings. We do send our newsletter to all of the RNOs. So if you're not getting that, we can check and make sure that you're on our list. Hotel conversion cost. I think it depends on the hotel. So if you have a question about that, if you want to reach out to me, I'm happy to answer that as well. So based on my comment above, funding provided to Colorado Coalition for the Homeless were hands-off in implementation and operations. That is not true. It really depends on the situation. So Fusion, the city provided some gap finance funding for Colorado Coalition for the Homeless to purchase that facility and operate it as supportive housing. So there's a difference between when we're funding a housing project, and we're one of many funders in that and helping them get it off the ground in terms of the development of the property, versus when we hold a contract with a shelter operator and we are monitoring and continuously checking in with and holding to outcomes that operator for those shelter services. Database on housing available for 30% of income. Yeah, if you'll go to our website, for those of you looking for information on affordable housing, we do have on our website at denvergov.org/housing. I think Katie's putting it into the Q&A. We have affordable housing by rental and purchase available on our website. Sorry, there's so many questions coming in that it's moving my chat. What outcomes and metrics? So all of our contracts have outcomes and metrics for the number of people served, how many times they're fed, what support services are provided, what wraparound services are provided. We look to see how many people exit from homelessness. There is a lot of data on the House 1000 website. If you haven't looked on that, there's actually a data dashboard that's showing all of the outcomes for all of these properties. And I believe it breaks it out by hotels and micro communities. So we are reporting a lot of that out on that specific initiative as well, if that's helpful. There is a recording of this meeting that will be available, and that will be on our website. Yes, the non-congregate shelters, Best Western is intended to be eventually converted to permanent supportive housing. That will be long-term. That will be through the Denver Housing Authority, which owns that facility. So we are currently leasing that from them for the short term so that we can use it as non-congregate shelter until we can get folks into permanent housing. And then Denver Housing Authority, as they come up with those development plans, will come back out to the community, and they will be working on a rezoning process for Best Western, which I believe they've already started. But there will be community meetings, just letting folks know that that is transitioning to supportive housing at that time. I don't know about Neighborhood Watch not being on the police and business meetings. Again, if you want to get in touch with us, I'm happy to give you my email and I can make sure that you get added to those lists. I apologize. The mayor's community engagement office has been primarily responsible for sending out all of those meetings. And so I don't know why or where they got their lists from. City housing facilities not being equally distributed. Again, I would encourage you to reach out to me and I will I'll give you my email address here in your question and I'm happy to talk that through with you. I think if you look at it, it is pretty fairly evenly distributed. We do know that there's what's called an inverted L in our city along I-70 and I-25 corridor where we have higher concentrations of poverty. The city has done a lot of really active work to try to change that, including offering a lot of down payment assistance and things to folks who are living in those neighborhoods or historically did to try to help change kind of historic income gaps. Among any number of things. I'm happy to talk to you about that more if you want to get in touch with me. And I apologize again if you feel like there's been any accusation of lack of empathy for District 8. I heard that definitely at the DoubleTree meeting. That is not something that we feel. We're really working with you closely and hope to be able to address all of your concerns. Let's see, where else do we have to go? I'm trying to get all these questions answered. Third-party providers. You can come directly to us when you have problems. That is one of the ways that we are happy to be helpful. So again, please reach out if there's some way we can be helpful there. And yes, it is true with low barrier programs, somebody can refuse to participate in some of the wraparound services. We do not require people to participate in, for example, substance use treatment while they're staying in a facility. They can't use while they're in the facility. That's part of the operator agreements and part of their being a guest there. But we don't require them to maintain sobriety to either get into the program or stay in the program. Our goal is to have our wraparound services providers be able to help connect with those people. And over time, you develop a relationship and encourage people to get into the programs that they need. When people do have severe cases of mental health, behavioral health, or substance use needs, they are referred to other facilities that are better able to care for those individuals. Otherwise, it is really up to the folks that are staying there to engage in those wraparound services. They do have to engage in case management. It is something that is an expectation while in these programs, that they will engage with case management to start working on moving toward a stable housing outcome for them so that they're not staying at the shelter permanently. So I think we've gotten to most everyone's questions. If we didn't, again, I just encourage you to reach out to us, sabrina.alley@denvergov.org. You can also just go to our website and we have links there to get in touch with us. Happy to continue engaging with the community. And I appreciate those of you, particularly from District 8, who are concerned about the House 1,000 initiative and the new shelters going in there. We are committed to continuing to engage with you all and answering all your questions and making sure your concerns are addressed and that we are being responsive and accountable to your community. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. We really appreciate it. We will have this recording up on the website. Encourage others to take a look and to fill out our survey. It does close tomorrow night, so please share that widely. Thanks so much for being here and hope you all have a good night.